my name's Rachel and today we're going to ask the question, why are YA fantasy books so mediocre? Not all of them. Some of them are, and I want to talk about them today. And I want to talk about why they are mediocre, what it means to be a mediocre YA fantasy book, in particular, that age range and that genre, and how I would fix certain YA fantasy books. There is a YA fantasy author who writes several books, Catherine Purdy, and I recently read this book by her on request from one of my patrons, and it was not good. I have previously read another Catherine Purdy book that was mediocre in a different way. There's different ways to be mediocre. Yes, there's a range of mediocrity. Isn't that fun? This is the most mediocre YA fantasy book I have read in quite some time, and I have read a lot. This is the kind of mediocre that lands itself with a 1-star rating. Mediocre can be anywhere from 1 to 3 stars. And I'm going to give some advice on how not to end up with another mediocre YA fantasy book if you are a writer from a reader's perspective. What I'm not talking about is Caraval. Caraval is not mediocre. Caraval is badly written and ridiculous to boot. Burning Glass by Catherine Purdy is fine on a sentence level. Books I classify as mediocre are typically written fine if we are just talking about the prose. They have a baseline that should be good. They have okay writing, it's fine, it's totally fine. But then what they do with the story elements, they do absolutely nothing remarkable. There's a baseline that should be good, and then there's nothing remarkable about the book. They don't make memorable characters or stakes or plot or use of the themes that they're using, if they're even using any theme at all. And you will remember almost nothing about these books 6 months after you read them because it was written to be so unremarkable. It's frustrating. The way that these are written, this particular kind of book that I'm talking about is a really frustrating book because you almost are reading it and you're asking, why was this published? What was the point? Why did publishing feel that this was remarkable enough to TradPub publish this book? They are the literary equivalent of if you are listening to a song by somebody who has a good voice, but then you feel nothing from the music or the lyrics. You skip the song every time. It'd be like if Sleep Token were even able to make a skippable song, which they don't. These books are doing nothing special. I've read a lot of kinds of YA fantasy mediocrity. Some have made me angry in how mediocre they are. Those are things like Everless, Red Queen, The Shadows Between Us, and Kingdom of the Wicked. Then there's ones that are so mediocre I DNF because I can't stand it anymore. Ever the Hunted, Snow Like Ashes, Ash Princess, and Royal Bastards. And then there is mediocrity that is just so mid that I give it like 2.5 to 3 stars and I roll my eyes and I move on, like Belladonna and Bonecryer's Mood, which is the other Catherine Purdy book that I felt was very mediocre. And then there's ones that I know are mediocre and I'm okay with them. I know that they're not great, they exist, it's fine. I don't feel upset at them. Those are things like Or Dead Queens, A Fire and Stars, A Touch of Gold, and The Traitor's Game. The sequel to The Traitor's Game though was so very, very mid that I had to DNF it. The majority of these books in this category that I'm talking about are typically about a young adult main character who is fighting in a revolution with other young adults. There is usually a strong romance, either subplot or it takes over the plot, and oftentimes you can find a love triangle. There are a lot of books that have this similar setup that I actively avoid because I don't want to have a mediocre reading experience, like this and this and this and this. But once in a while a patron will ask me to read a book, so that's what we have in this case, is this was requested by a patron. So the mediocrity that is the source of my ire today is Burning Glass by Catherine Purdy, which was so aggressive in its mediocrity. I wanted to fling myself into the sun while reading it because the disappointment was so frustrating. I just wanted it to stop. This is about a girl named Sunya, and yes, the audiobook pronounces Sonya as Sunya. I don't know why. Don't ask me. I don't know what's going on here. Sunya is an auraseer, which is basically an empath. She can sense other people's emotions. She accidentally kills, right in the beginning, all the other auraseers in her country, and then is sent to be the auraseer for the emperor because she's the oldest one living in her country. And there's a love triangle between her, the emperor, and the emperor's nice brother. The emperor is like a snot-nosed Joffrey Baratheon kind of character. This book was deeply mediocre. It doesn't set itself apart in any meaningful way, even if it has things that other YA fantasy books do not have. So sure, it has a power that you don't typically see, which is aura seeing, but it does have that cringeworthy love triangle a la Red Queen, which takes over everything in the story. Despite having potential for cool magic and politics and themes, we sit with our main character feeling torn between the emperor and his brother and literally crying all the time. This dominates the narrative. I struggled with how to review this book. I struggle with how to review mediocre books in general and suggest specific changes in them until will, I recently listened to Benjamin Percy talk about suspense. Not suspense the genre, but suspense the storytelling element, suspense as a writing tool. Many of you know I've been using Skillshare classes to help me learn how to do more structured reviews, and Benjamin Percy, who has written several novels, but he writes for DC Comics, which I'm a fan of, and he has a writing class called Writing Suspense: How to Write Stories That Thrill in Any Genre, and this really helps me in articulating what went wrong here and how I think it could have been fixed. I hope that this review will help any writers listening in preventing their story from becoming the next mediocre YA fantasy book. In Benjamin Percy's class, he breaks down the essentials of writing a story that utilizes suspense, not just overall, but in scene by scene. So talking about using not just one overall goal, but like small incremental goals, like in the scenes and in the story at large, and in that broader goal, also using triangulation. So triangulating between one character A, character B, and a element of the story, and using things like midpoint reversals in helping you develop a plot that keeps your reader wanting more rather than wanting to fling themselves into the sun. And he also discusses the turnstile of mysteries, or the dance of the flaming chainsaws, controlling what your reader knows for a thrilling effect, which he calls temporary blindness, building three-dimensional characters with clear motivations, and entwining the narrative plot and the emotional plot of your work. I found this class really helpful in helping me to articulate where we could have taken this story from being a mediocre slog to a book that I would have really loved, probably. And to think about how many of the books that I mentioned previously could have been something really special had we utilized more of these writing tools under the umbrella of writing suspense. So I'm going to use this class to help me review this book. Whether you're a writer or a reviewer, I think you can learn a lot from Skillshare classes. When it comes to storytelling, Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, and they have a wide depth and breadth of topics, everything from illustration, graphic design, photography, marketing, music, and productivity. I know somebody who watches me said that they did end up snagging a Skillshare membership, and they've been using it to learn how to do art on their tablet, which is so cool. They have all of that, but also tons and tons of writing classes. There's so much writing advice on there, and I recommend these classes not just for writers, but also for people learning how to write reviews and just how to analyze a story. They have authors teaching classes such as I've taken Daniel Jose Older's class and Saba Tahir's class. Skillshare is an on-demand platform, and it has stackable lessons so members can learn at their own pace no matter what your skill level is. So whether you want to learn the basics of watercolor painting or how to start your own creative business, Skillshare has you covered. Their classes can take you from beginner to pro alongside a supportive community that you can chat with and work on your projects with. You can focus your creative journey with Skillshare Learning Paths, a set of curated classes that build on one another, reinforcing your lessons. They're available in a range of experience levels from beginner to advanced. And one learning path I've been utilizing is Develop Memorable Fictional Characters, which includes Daniel Jose Older's class and Saba Tahir's class, which I have loved, as well as a class by Lindsay Summers that I am excited to take. The first 500 people to use my link down below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So whatever your craft is that you're looking to hone, whether it's writing or reviewing or marketing your book, click that link below to get your 1-month free trial of Skillshare. And thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. The official synopsis for Burning Glass by Patron Purdy is: Sunya was born with a rare gift to feel what those around her feel, both physically and emotionally, a gift that she's kept hidden from the Empire for 17 long years. Just want to say that we don't see her in that part of her life. When we open up, we are already at the convent where she has been residing for a little while now, and she does not like having to be at this convent for other Oroseers. After a reckless mistake wipes out all the other girls with similar abilities, Sunya is hauled off to the palace and forced to serve the Emperor as his sovereign Oroseer. Tasked with sensing the intentions of would-be assassins, Sunya is under constant pressure to protect the Emperor. But Sunya's power is untamed and reckless, and she can't always decipher when other people's impulses end and her own begin. In a palace full of warring emotions and looming darkness, Sunya feels that the biggest danger to the Empire may be herself. As she struggles to wrangle her abilities, Sunya seeks refuge in her tenuous alliances with the charming yet volatile Emperor Valko and his idealistic younger brother Anton, the Crown Prince. But when threats of revolution pit the two brothers against each other, Sunya must choose which brother to trust and which to betray. Let me get 3 things out of the way. One of them is that my nose itches. Just kidding. One of them is that I have no idea why this book is called Burning Glass. I don't know. Don't ask me. It has 0 to do with the plot. Number 2, there is self-harm in this book. Basically, chapter 1, page 1, I'm talking like immediately, there is self-harm, and I don't like the way it was used or talked about. Trigger warning until this timestamp, until if you don't want to, or if you cannot hear about self-harm. We have, I'm getting this out of the way because I don't really want to talk about it because I would just take this out of the book. It was completely unnecessary and kind of weird and gross for it to be in there. here. We have girls, or seers, who are taking on the emotions of others, and some of them use self-harm to cope. Our main character's best friend Yulia is like basically in a coma right at the start of the book. She's been cutting, and eventually by the end of either chapter 1 or 2, she wakes up and has taken on too much emotion at once because our main character Sunya accidentally kills all of the other aura seers, and Yulia feels all that pain. Off page, we hear that Yulia had felt all of that pain and decided to cut an artery on her own leg and dies by suicide. Another girl, I think it was that she was pulling out her own hair, and then another girl, this isn't self-harm, but her coping mechanism is like severe crying fits. So we set the stage of how overwhelming it is to be an aura seer, and then do discussions of self-harm that feel not appropriate. I don't really know how else to describe it. The way it was utilized here just felt like it was there for shock and drama, and there was no trigger warning. It was needless. It didn't discuss this in what I feel like is an appropriate way, which is really difficult to do, and you need to be very intentional about it. There is another book that discusses taking on the emotions of others and what toll this takes on the body in a much better way, and that is The Grief Keeper, which I do recommend, as I feel like that's a very intentional book about a similar topic, but I don't think there's any self-harm in The Grief Keeper. If you're going to talk about taking on others' emotions and the toll that has on your body, I just don't think that self-harm is an appropriate conversation to have unless you're willing to be very intentional about it. Third and final thing I want to get out of the way is this has a group of people called the Romska, and it is very obvious that this is an allegory for Romani folks. The country she lives in, Ryazan, is basically fantasy Tsarist Russia, and the other countries that are surrounding Ryazan are based on real world countries. So there's Shangli, which is China, Estengard, which is obviously fantasy France, Abdara is fantasy Iran, and Sunya was basically given by her parents to this fantasy version of the Romani, the Romska, to keep her safe because she was an aura seer, and they wanted to avoid her being sent to live at the convent with the other aura seers and train her to use her power. I don't know whether or not this is Romani rep that is appropriate. All this to say, I feel like they're just sort of there for plot convenience. All this to say, I just want to warn you that it's in there and it might not be done in a considerate and appropriate way. I don't know for sure. So if you are Romani and are considering reading this, please be forewarned. All right, let's dive in here. We open and she's already living at the convent. That her time living with the Romska, them hiding her from the convent, is over. We hear about how the common people are angry because this is like Tsarist Russia right before the revolution. They live under an empire, and Sunya is an aura seer, and she doesn't like or care about this. She doesn't want to be trained. She doesn't want to live at the convent, even though this causes significant issues for quality of life for her because she's taking on other people's emotions and she doesn't have any way to cope with that appropriately. We hear how much the other aura seers, which includes girls of all ages, some older than her, some younger than her, some her age, have trouble, and some self-harm, including cutting, is used by certain characters, including her best friend Yulia. And then there's a confusing string of events that happens in the first 2 chapters. Sunya sees the common people are like revolting, and then they're leaving, but then she's taken on some of the emotions of the common people. She locks most of the aura seers up in a room inside of the convent, most of whom she finds kind of annoying. Her friend Yulia is in the infirmary, while the rest of the aura seers, except the 2, I guess there's 2 little girls, the rest of the aura seers she locked into a room because I don't know, she found them annoying, I guess. I really don't understand what happened in the beginning of this. She goes outside of the convent. It's freezing. She runs into a man who is like mentally unwell and doesn't speak. He and her share a fire. He keeps going to touch the fire and she keeps being like, stop touching that. And then he accidentally lights himself on fire and burns down much of the convent, including the entire room full of aura seers that she had locked away. We're on like chapter 2 at this point, and all this confusing crap has happened. This could have been a great inciting incident, but only if we had written it in a different way, where we had like layered it, made it suspenseful, invited the audience to ask multiple questions. What if instead we had Sunya waking up in the snow, the convent is in ashes, everybody's dead, most of them are dead except for her. So now we're asking, who did this? Why would they do this? Why is our main character out in the snow? Why is she still alive? In Benjamin Percy's class, he talks about writing your plot like an orchestra. So you think of this of a book like a song. Think about like that song at the beginning of Star Wars. 'Wars. That's how I wanted this book to begin. A big boom and then plot beats that are creating anticipation, all building towards something that always feels just out of reach. But the whole book, you need to be the architect of, not just the initial part. For instance, The Shadows Between Us has a great start. The first line is this:
"They've never found the body of the first and only boy who broke my heart, and they never will."
And that's a hook. You provide things that are indicative of who your main character is, and then you triangulate between your main character, other characters, and the things between them, which is your story context. But The Shadows Between Us failed because the world wasn't fleshed out, our characters' motivations were not fleshed out, and by the time the main character's sins, which are the stakes, are revealed to the other characters, this thing between them, no one cares about that anymore, and it just drops off. There's no triangulation, there's no point. A similar thing happens in Burning Glass. So by the time that Sunya reveals to one of her love interests, the nice brother, that she killed an entire room full of people, he's like, "I accept you and forgive you." And you're like, so we were worried about that for nothing? I think it would have worked out better if we had instead not had Sunya knew that it was her. Eventually she remembers that it was her, and then she has to grapple with, I've been two people. I have been this revolutionary who killed an entire bunch of people, and I have been this new person who was not a revolutionary and didn't want all those people to die, and now I have to grapple with myself, with these two different people that I've become, and I have to ask myself, am I a good person? Is any of this that I have done good? I think it would have been much better if we had it where Sunya is initially trying to figure out who burnt down the convent, why she was spared, and then we pull a midpoint reversal where she figures out it was her, and now we've changed the trajectory of the story and the goals in a way that keeps the audience interested and raises the stakes and leads to more questions. Why would she burn down the convent? Okay, maybe she was secretly part of the revolution, and now this is in conflict with her status as the emperor's overseer, who's supposed to sense emotions in order to protect him from others. But she's the snake in the hen house, so to speak. And now she's developed a relationship with these people that she is a revolutionary against. Now, if we're being honest, I think that this power of aura seeing is just a little silly, and the idea that she's appointed to some revered position just for being an empath and that's somehow going to protect the emperor is ridiculous. She's completely untrained. She only has this position because the majority of the overseers are dead. The only two living ones are little kids. She's the only living one, and randomly it tries to play into this idea that, oh yeah, there's those two little girls that she definitely cares about and has to protect by being a good overseer. It honestly makes no sense. We should have just had the two little girls who were left and the nuns from the convent go to the emperor's palace so that they could train all of them, including Sunya, who is untrained and has been untrained basically her whole life. In fact, those little girls probably have more training than she does. So it doesn't really make sense that they're just like, well, you're the oldest, here you go. Have an untrained overseer be in this sovereign position right next to the emperor. It simply doesn't make sense. And there's ways that we could have done this where it would have made sense very easily and it would have added more stakes to the story. Let me summarize what happens in the book and then talk about what I would have done differently. Like, let's just do that because that's the easiest way to do this. I can sum it up pretty quickly because despite being like, I think it's like 500 pages, it's just like a circle. We just do the same thing over and over again. So she accidentally murders all the other overseers. Sunya is picked up from the convent, which worships some religion that is so forgettable and unremarkable and irrelevant to the story that I can't tell you a damn thing about it. And she's picked up by the emperor's brother, Anton, and taken to the emperor, Valko, because now she's the overseer. The emperor is basically Joffrey Baratheon. He's an entitled, volatile little shit who shouldn't be in power and is really spoiled. We get this storyline that is basically like, okay, well, these brothers were separated and they thought that the now emperor, the names are so stupid. We're just gonna call him Vulcan. So Vulcan, they all thought, okay, he's dead. And then come to find out, he's not dead. So a lot of people were like, well, was he replaced with a changeling? Nope, he wasn't. But damn, it would have been a lot better if he had been. Like, it would have been a lot more interesting of a plot. Imagine them trying to prove that this is a plant by another country. This is a changeling child that was a plant by another country in order to create instability, create a puppet on the throne. His brother thinks, the nice brother thinks that the way he runs the empire is bad and has been doing secret revolutionary things. And the emperor is really handsy with Sunya and like really inappropriate. And whenever she leaves either of the brothers, every interaction she leaves crying because all she does is cry. She can't decipher her feelings from other people's feelings, and we basically repeat the scene of bratty emperor wants her to be his mistress, when he marries in a political marriage. And then at night she goes and talks to the nice brother who keeps her at arm's length. And it turns out he reads poetry by a guy who happens to be an old friend of Sunya's from her time with the Romska. He's a friend who had taught her how to read, and now he is a secret revolutionary who writes poetry that is anti-imperialist, and the brother just happens to read this anti-imperialist poetry. Feels very convenient. All of this accumulates in basically a revolution. The common people revolt. Nobody likes the emperor. His political marriage falls through. The common people rise up. The emperor is arrested, and Sunya cried the whole way there. And her and the nice, quiet, revolution-supporting brother are tentatively together in the end, and he doesn't mind that she accidentally killed a room full of Oroseers at the beginning and then cried for 500 pages. Now listen, I'm a chronic crybaby, but reading about that, you better be ready to get creative, and this book did not. Benjamin Percy talks again about creating plot like you're orchestrating music. So you look at your chapter breaks, here's an upbeat, here's a downbeat, here's an upbeat, here's a downbeat. You don't want several downbeats in a row, but this book is an upbeat and then it's downbeats for 450 pages. What's supposed to happen is that you balance these things. You balance the upbeats and the downbeats. You look back over your story chapter by chapter and see where you have done these things and try to orchestrate them in a way that is fluid and that keeps the reader's attention. Hitting these, you have to balance these things. You have to hit these plots of great emotional catharsis coming right after plot points that are the most nerve-wracking. This book did neither. There is no Dark Night of the Soul. There is no hitting of rock bottom right before the third act. There is no midpoint reversal. There is no intricate weaving of the plot points where we seed in the emotional trouble and have that bounce off of the narrative trouble. We have a love triangle that is miserable to read and a main character who cries and does not know how to use her own power, even though there was definitely a avenue we could have taken to have her learn about her power. And then finally, after several hundreds of pages of dealing with this god-awful love triangle, we have a revolution that the audience does not care about because it took a back seat in a completely different vehicle behind the love triangle. Here's how I wish that the story had gone. Instead of an Oroseer, I wish that we had a power that allows her to manipulate other people's emotions. Maybe most people in this world who have magic are people who can sense other people's emotions. I would like to see her manipulate other people's emotions. Maybe she can fake being an Oroseer, fake being an empath because she isn't one. So we have to keep up that ruse because she isn't one, she is something more dangerous. So maybe she's part of the revolution and then gets sent to the convent. She kills everyone there, but when she wakes up, she doesn't remember doing this. She gets sent to the emperor to be the Oroseer because she's the last one left, but then she figures out, wait, I can't perform my duty, and has to fake it and doesn't remember anything, so she doesn't know why her power isn't working. Meanwhile, everyone is trying to scramble to find out who attacked the convent, who killed all these Oroseers. Maybe there were Oroseers from the other countries because it is referenced that there are Oroseers in other countries, but they get referred to, they get slut-shamed, they get put into sex work and slut-shamed for it in the narrative, so I don't really like that. So instead, why didn't we have some of the Oroseers go to this convent, and then some of them got caught in the crossfire. They died. So the allies of this fantasy Russia are breathing down their neck trying to parse out what occurred. And they're trying to get Sunya to use her powers to get answers, but she doesn't actually have the empath power. And the prince who she thought was loyal to his emperor brother is actually a revolutionary, and the only person she can tentatively trust is the emperor's brother. He and her have to wrestle with the terrible things that they've done in the name of revolution, such as burning down the convent. And together they have to team up to try to prove that the emperor is in fact a changeling who was put on the throne by an enemy. And maybe it turns out that the enemy, actually the revolution did it and they didn't know about it, and the revolution is bad too. There's so many ways we could have raised the stakes here. The quickest way to mediocrity for your YA fantasy book is to make a love triangle and then make everything else second to that. Red Queen falls heavily into this trap, and it is the major reason why I find that book so aggressively mediocre. With The Shadows Between Us, we had a similar issue where instead of a love triangle, we have a I want to kill the king because I'm ambitious. Why is she ambitious for this in particular? Why does the king need to be dead in order for her to achieve certain goals? Why does she need to be in charge? Why does she need to rule? What exists inside and outside of the kingdom that she feels she needs to be in control of, and why? And so when she's falling for him, I'm not seeing the problem. They could just get married and then she'd be in a position of power. Issue over. And sure, she killed her first love and she's worried that he'll find out about it, but by the time she tells the king, he doesn't care. He laughs it off, and that makes the problem go away. They just stop investigating her. The lack of stakes, the lack of information that would have raised the stakes, or the lack of creating like an interruption in the progression of the story with a midpoint reversal, change changing the story goal. All of this culminates in making this book aggressively mediocre. Now I will say, of course, I have to say it, otherwise people are going to be mad. This stuff isn't going to bother every reader. Burning Glass had fans. There were still people that rated it 5 stars. The Shadow Between Us had lots of fans. That book got a special edition. So take this review for what it is. It's subjective, but my subjective experience is that despite being a fan of many, many, many YA fantasy books, I have had to wade through a figurative sea of mediocre ones in order to find something exceptional or even just enjoyable. So my question for the audience is, what YA fantasy book did you find to be fine on a prose level but aggressively mediocre in things like character arc, theme, plot, and what, if you can think of anything, would have been a way to crank up the suspense in that book to make it more of a standout book? What questions could have been asked of the text and then answered by the text that would have made the book more rich for you? A standout YA fantasy book to me is Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko, where we're not really sure why the lady, which is the main character's mom, is doing what she's doing, and we're not really sure if the main character is going to remember that she was tasked with killing the prince. We're not really sure why the lady treats her daughter like crap. There's a lot of unanswered questions, but there's a lot of smaller incremental goals. There's a midpoint reversal. There's so much to keep your attention during this book. This book really cranks up the suspense while also balancing things like theme and a fun plot and characters who have arcs all on their own. Like even the side characters in this are very, very good. This is a standout YA fantasy book to me, and it's all because the author took the time to really plot out the beats and do architecture in this story to make it like a real masterpiece. I mean, the plot beats are it's just perfect. It's like listening to a damn good song. You immediately want to hit replay and experience it all over again. No skips. All right, I hope this was helpful. Thank you to my patron who requested that I review this book. I wish I had liked it more, but at least we got the opportunity to talk about how to make books better. So thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Leave your comments and questions down below, and I will see you next time. Bye. Hello. Before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons. Oh, actually, I have to show you something. Somebody made me something. Vienna made me a Golden Girls bag because thank you for being a friend, and the inside is gay. So I thank you. Shout out Vienna. I'm very excited about this. Okay. Thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Brittany Bobitney, Cami, Chris, Christine and Bean, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emperor's New Blues, Aaron with 2 E's, Eric, JC, Jack and Jill, John E, Julie D, Casey McKenzie, Kate W, Caitlin M, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lex, Night Owl Reader, Alice, Rain, Reese, SJ, Samar, Scarlet, Shiny, SMK, the epic feminist side-eye of Carlos. Hi, Peggy. Hello. Thank you all so much for being a friend. I appreciate you. Happy New Year. Thank you for being here. Okay, goodbye. And last but not least, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Starch Marxist patrons, and those are Alicia, Amanda, Andy, Angelica, Anita, Artie the Ninth, Ashley H, Ava, Ballads and Bookends, Beck, Blythe, Bookish Bats, Bookish Brainrot, Bree, Caitlin, Cardinal Ginger, Carlin, Casper, Catherine, Kathy, Chris, CJ, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Corey, Darren, Deborah, Dex, Diet Goth, Dorothea, Ebby, Emerald Dodge, Emily A, Emily L, Emma, Aaron, Ezra Moon, Fiona, Hannah C, Hannah T, Harpy Curo, Haley G, India Inks, JM Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, JT, Jen Michelle, Gender Queer, Jenny G, Jillian, Jojo Bookish, Jess Pugsley, Kat, Catherine, Katie, Katya, Kayala, Kendra, Kiara, Kylie, Laughing Cat Dog, Lazarus Ray, Library of Scars, Lisa B, LP, Lou Siri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, MV Marlowe, Madison, Marcella, Marquita, Malara, MK Books, Molly, James, Nat, Natalie, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Nyan Binary, Paige P, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Pixel Stars, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rivi, Rosie Thorne, Rowan, Secoria, Sadie, Samantha M, Sarah C, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Sarah Z, Shamed, Shannon, Sheen Onion, Sean, Talia, 3 Old Dogs, Tina, Toast, Trash Can Teddy, Tito Phoenix, and Writer A. Thank you all so much for being a friend.
Thank you.